Hey, what's up YouTube? Skybadger here, and we're back with a different episode to normal. Today we're going to be talking about the new unit that is coming to Call of War, the Paratrooper. So first things first, I'd just like to thank Call of War for giving me access to this unit early, the ability to go in, have a play with it, and then share my thoughts. So thanks for that. Next thing I'm just going to say is this unit's still under development and it is still changing. So, in this video I'm going to talk about some tactics, how I think they should be used, how they perform. It's very possible that even before I release this video, they update them and this whole thing becomes pretty much useless. That's already happened to me once. So, keep this in mind that this unit is probably going to change a lot, and this video could become outdated pretty quickly. And it's very likely that what I'm talking about now might not even be the same unit that makes it into the game. So, anyway, onto the unit. Now, when I first heard about Paratroopers coming to Call of War, I was immediately quite worried. Having played Conflict of Nations and seen how they implemented the airborne infantry unit, I was worried that this unit might be overpowered, overused, and just something that gold spammers can spam out to capture territory quickly. And I mean, it could be used for that, but due to some of the limits they've put on it in CAL, I don't think it could be used as effectively as the airborne infantry has been able to be used in Conflict of Nations. So let's just start by talking about some of the stats of this unit. The Paratrooper comes in 4 levels. There's level 1, 2, 3, 4, 4th being the Elite. Now, the unit itself is made up of 2 parts. You have the plane unit, or the transport, the glider, whatever you want to call it, and you also have the Paratroopers themselves. They're 2 separate units, but they research as one. The Paratrooper glider, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't change much over the levels. Effectively, the only thing that changes with the glider unit itself is the amount of range it can travel, and that varies between at max 325 kilometers and at the first level 250. So already we can see that the attack location is relatively low. The level also determines the amount of time it takes before the units regroup. So this is a new mechanic that is made for paratroopers. Once they land, they attack immediately, but they have to take a certain amount of time to regroup after that initial combat. So after that initial combat, they then take, at level 1, 18 hours before they can move and take new orders. Well, not take new orders, you can still order them, but they just won't do most of them. I'll talk about that later. Kind of confusing myself now. And at the elite level, it only takes 6 hours before they can move. So 18 to 6 hours is obviously a big difference. And that is one of the things that I believe CAL has put into the game to make it so they can't be, just absolutely, too overpowered. Once they're deployed too, unlike the airborne infantry in Conflict of Nations, they can't immediately get back into the plane and fly off again. So they're a one-use thing. Once they're deployed from the glider, from the plane, they are stuck as the paratrooper units for the rest of the game. Whether or not that changes, I don't know, but that's something that also kind of nerfs them a bit. In Conflict of Nations, once your airborne infantry landed, regrouped, captured the territory, you could send them off again on another mission and you could be bunny hopping across the country within hours. But with this unit here in Call of War, it can't do that. It lands and then it's stuck as a paratrooper unit. Now this unit has also changed over the time I've been testing it. Initially it started with a speed of 20 kilometers per hour. Now it's got 25. So that kind of nerfed them a bit too. They couldn't, land within 6 hours, be running off in the other direction at the speed of light. So they have since been buffed to 25. However, it's not really that big of a deal. At low levels, paratroopers start with some pretty okay stats. They're not too bad. 4.5 against infantry and 1.5 against tanks. However, against armor, and this is where a few of my buddies actually thought that, they could be maybe a little overpowered, is against armor. At max, they have 3 points against armor and 9 against infantry. And the whole point of paratroopers is they're meant to be a light infantry. In this case, obviously, if you can read the description, they say they're special infantry, but traditionally paratroopers have been light infantry. The ability to fight armor has usually, historically, been their weak point. So giving them a rating of 3 against armor, isn't too bad, but I suspect, really, they should be one of the worst units against armor in the game. They might be specially trained, highly trained, but traditionally they don't fight armored units very well, at least historically. So, that's the stats. They have 15 hit points, if I forgot to mention that, and when they're in the air, they have 5 hit points as well. So, moving on from what they can actually do, let's talk about how you actually build them. Paratroopers, you can start researching at day 8, and they actually have some pretty interesting requirements. Now, these requirements have already changed in the week I've been in the game testing them. Initially, you needed a level 3 barracks to build them. They've downgraded that to a level 1, which saves on food, and you need a level 3 airbase. You also need, obviously, an industrial center, and you need a capital. So these can only be produced in your capital, just like commandos. Now, the thing with these as well is they take a long time to make. You don't realize this, but they take about 12 hours to produce. They're not particularly quick. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is they take a long time to make. Now, to actually build them, you need 1,000 food, 2,000 goods, 1,500 manpower, 1,000 metal, 500 oil, and 5,000 money. Or dollars, whatever. I mean, I don't know what currency we're using. We'll just go with money. So that's what you need to build them. Now, the next thing you're going to need to use these is runways. So these units travel around the map by flying from airbase to airbase. You can move them in convoys along the, in between airbases, but that's not really recommended. In fact, to be honest, at all, I don't really recommend moving them by themselves at all. They're really easy to shoot down with only 5 HP. So they move between air bases. They fly, they refuel, they work like any other air unit in the game. Now, the difference being they can't stack with any other air units in the game. So you can't chuck tactical bombers and interceptors and paratroopers in a stack. You can't do that. And that's something that I think was maybe potentially done again to nerf them, is they're really hard to escort. You need to constantly update the patrol zone of your interceptors to effectively cover them. I think, yeah, probably done to nerf them, but at the same time it is annoying that they're so easy to shoot down. So that's their movement right there. You fly them between air bases, they can move via convoys, and they can also move via convoys on the sea. Lastly is they cannot land on carriers. So that would be pretty cool to see. It would be overpowered as hell, but they cannot utilize carriers. So when you've got them into the area, you want to use them and you want to deploy them, there's a few things you need to know. First things first, they can only attack. You heard me right. You can't deploy them on your own territory, at least at this point, it's impossible. So you can't preemptively deploy them to defend against an enemy target, you have to attack an enemy. Now whether that be the enemy province itself, the center point, or an enemy unit, you have to attack one of those to deploy them. So that kind of hinders what they can be used for. You can't keep them back as a special unit that can be deployed quickly on defense. They can only be used to attack. Like, sure, maybe if you've got a large stack of them, you could deploy them to stop a large enemy group that's marching forwards, or a small enemy group, but they're pretty horrible at that too. So they can only be used to attack. You have to deploy them, you have to attack an enemy. Simple as that. Either the city or town of a province, or the enemy units itself. And that in itself is pretty annoying, makes them hard to use. The next one we're going to talk about is how to counter them. And this is something we had a lot of fun testing. So first things first, thanks to Fallow the dog for helping me test. Now, we set up a whole bunch of tests where we tested paratroopers against commandos, infantry, militia, and a couple of armored units, and also anti-air guns. And we wanted to figure out the best way to use paratroopers and the best way to defend against them. And what we found was militia still sucks. Don't worry guys, militia holds its place as the worst unit in the game, okay? Don't worry, that hasn't changed. And it never will change, in fact, guys. So if you use militia, it still sucks at even the most trivial task of defending against paratroopers. So with that out of the way, militia sucks. Next point is, the paratrooper actually is a horrible unit for attacking enemy targets. In one-on-ones, it generally loses. Unless the enemy is in a disadvantaged terrain, it pretty much wins most combats. The paratrooper can fly in and 50% of the time it will win an engagement in a 1v1 against infantry. It'll get its ass kicked by commandos, smoke militia of course, because I mean, anyway, no one uses militia, let's move on. Anti-air units, they shoot them down in one shot unless they're disadvantaged. So unless you've got your AA guns in mountainous terrain, they're pretty much the best defense. One level 1 anti-air gun will shoot down a enemy paratrooper pretty much 90% of the time. It's only when the air gun is in disadvantaged territory that you start to have problems. That it's minus 25%, actually has a really big impact. And if that paratrooper does land, they then beat the AA gun. So that's something you need to consider, is AA guns will shoot down the initial unit, but they suck against fighting the paratrooper itself. So pretty much your go-to unit for defending against paratroopers should be anti-air guns, and that means you're going to need to spread anti-air guns. If your enemy's using them, which I'm going to be honest, not many people will, you need to spread them out over a large area. Now, one anti-air gun will shoot down one paratrooper, and that's really all you need to know. You can deploy infantry if you want, but that's a little bit more expensive, and it's a little hit and miss. Sometimes the paratrooper wins, sometimes the infantry wins. It depends. If you're on core territory, you'll probably have more luck with that, seeing you have the core defense bonus. But apart from that, it's really hard to say. Commandos, they pretty much win most of the time. Now, if you upgrade all those units to max, so you have max level paratrooper, max level militia, max level infantry, max level AA, and commandos, did I miss anything? You pretty much get the same results. The AA gun will still shoot down the enemy paratroopers, but with a higher success rate. Every now and then, due to RNG though, a paratrooper can slip through, but it's definitely the most surefire way. Militia still sucks, don't worry. It still sucks, nothing's changed. Infantry fares actually a lot better. At higher levels, infantry, although it's still, I swear, about 50-50, the paratrooper sometimes does come out on top, but more often than not, the infantry will as well. The commandos, though, they still kick ass, although they take a lot more damage to high-level paratroopers. So what I'm gauging from this and what I'm figuring out is you need to send these in large numbers. You need to send a large amount of paratroopers, especially if you're going to attack an enemy target, because they just get shredded. In a one-on-one, they seem to lose to just about anything. So you either need to target and single out a single province to land and capture. Maybe that province has something important like a runway that you can capture and utilize, or it has a industrial center that you can use to then pump out troops. But I don't think in this current version of the game paratroopers are meant to attack enemies. Don't get me wrong, they are a pretty powerful unit, but considering the fact you can only build them from your capital, you can never build up a substantial force to do anything really major with. You can't afford to attack the enemy with your special units, or else they're just going to get absolutely decimated. Out of the something like 12 tests I performed, actually it'd be more than that because I did be about 24 tests, 26, 28. I only have 2 paratroopers deployed left to show for it in my test game, because the rest of them pretty much died. Some of them didn't quite make it out of the testing zone. That's another problem. So they're really hard to use. They need to be used against special targets and for special objectives. They should not be used for fighting an enemy unless it's an emergency. They're simply too valuable. You can spend days pumping these out, but then you're just going to deploy them, especially if you want to fight someone, and they're just going to die. They need to be used to capture strategic zones and then hold them. Saying that though, they suck at that too because they can't be deployed to your own provinces to defend them, which makes them really hard to use as well. They can only be used to attack the enemy. So, from the experience I've had in this testing round, they are a unit that I might make sparsely, to be honest. 1 paratrooper here, 2 paratroopers there, but they're not something I'm going to spam out all game. I still feel like the commando is a better use of your capital production. Not only is it really still, quite frankly, overpowered, it is a lot faster, has pretty much, actually it has the same amount of hit points now. It is way better in every single terrain. It's more viable, it doesn't suck. And the commando pretty much has double the stats. It has 10 on attack against infantry and 5 against armor, while your max level, actually I'll refer to the elite paratrooper. The elite paratrooper only has 9 attack against infantry and 3 attack against armor. So it's 1 down in the armor department, and it is 1 down in the infantry department and 2 down in the armor department. On top of that, it also has 10 less hit points. It does have a 50% bonus in hills and forests, but that will help, but hills and forests only make up so much of the map. Actually, I think they make up the majority. So yeah, the paratrooper is a good unit. if you can find a way to use it. At this point in time, I have not. So that's my review of the Paratrooper, and that's my thoughts. If you have any questions about it, let me know in the comments.